Did you know that the United States Constitution, the foundation of American democracy, was inspired by a native alliance that predates it by centuries? Before the Founding Fathers ever inked their signatures on parchment, a powerful, organized, and democratic system already existed. It was indigenous, and it was brilliant. Today we're diving deep into the remarkable story of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy, and how their centuries-old system of governance helped shape the American experiment. This isn't just hidden history, it's a blueprint, hidden in plain sight. So just before we dive in, just to let you know that we're seeing that 55% of our viewers who watch our channel regularly have not subscribed to us yet, so we're asking you a favor. Before we start our deep dive, if you like us and want to support us, there's a free and simple way to do that. Just hit that subscribe button so that you never miss out when we put out new videos. We assure you that we will commit to bringing you the best videos each week. We also crave your feedback and suggestions as we aim to give you the best content possible. And now to our feature presentation. The Haudenosaunee, meaning people of the Longhouse, is one of the oldest continuous participatory democracies in the world. This confederacy originally included 5 nations: the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca. And later in the 18th century, the Tuscarora joined, forming the 6 nations. These nations covered vast lands across what is now New York State, parts of Pennsylvania, Ontario, and Quebec. Their alliance was not built through war or conquest, but through diplomacy and shared governance. At the heart of the Confederacy was the Great Law of Peace, a constitution orally passed down through generations, and possibly created as early as the 12th or 15th century. Imagine this: a pre-colonial society with checks and balances, elected representatives, term limits, leadership accountability, and even a role for women in governance. Sounds familiar? That's because it is. The Great Law of Peace is more than a spiritual code. It's a complex political framework with clearly defined principles. At the center was the Grand Council, composed of 50 chiefs from the 6 nations. These chiefs were not hereditary kings. They were chosen by clan mothers, powerful matriarchs who held the authority to appoint, and even remove, leaders who failed to meet their responsibilities. Each nation in the Confederacy maintained its autonomy, yet pledged allegiance to the whole. This system balanced local governance with unity, a federalist model that would later be echoed in the structure of the United States. There was no central tyrant. Decisions were made through consensus, often after long deliberation. Voices were heard, differences respected. Power was decentralized. This wasn't primitive democracy. This was advanced, inclusive, and deeply rooted in the values of peace, unity, and respect. Fast forward to the 1700s. Colonial leaders were looking for a model to unify the 13 disjointed colonies. Enter Benjamin Franklin. In 1754, Franklin, always a keen observer, attended the Albany Congress, where representatives of the colonies and members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy met to discuss mutual concerns, especially alliances and defense. There, Franklin was awestruck by the Confederacy's ability to maintain unity across multiple nations with differing languages and cultures. He wrote, "It would be a strange thing if 6 nations of ignorant savages should be capable of forming a scheme for such a union, and yet that a like union should be impracticable for 10 or a dozen English colonies." Yes, his language reflected the prejudices of his time, but his admiration was real. Franklin didn't just praise the system, he proposed it. The Albany Plan of Union, an early attempt to unify the colonies, was modeled after the Haudenosaunee structure. Though it wasn't adopted, it became a stepping stone toward what would become the Articles of Confederation, and eventually, the United States Constitution. Franklin wasn't alone. Thomas Jefferson and other founding fathers also interacted with and studied native governance structures. Jefferson himself owned a copy of the Great Law of Peace, translated into English by missionaries and scholars. George Washington too had extensive interactions with the Haudenosaunee during his military campaigns. Though relations were complex and sometimes violent, their political structure left a lasting impression. These ideas, especially checks and balances, bicameral councils and coalition government, echoed in the drafting of the Constitution. The United States adopted the idea of independent states forming a larger federation, representatives chosen by the people, a council, what we now call the Senate, and a more populist voice, or the House. The parallels are more than coincidence. Even United States symbols carry Haudenosaunee echoes. Take the eagle clutching arrows in the Great Seal of the United States. This imagery was used in Haudenosaunee teachings, where the eagle watched over the tree of peace, alerting the people of danger. The bundle of arrows represented unity, each nation being one arrow in a stronger group. The idea was simple. A single arrow breaks easily, but a bundle of arrows, much harder to snap. Even the concept of impeachment, removing leaders who abuse their power, mirrors the authority of clan mothers to remove chiefs who broke the peace or disrespected the people. Here's something the Founding Fathers didn't take with them, unfortunately. In Haudenosaunee society, women held significant political power. They owned property, passed on clan lineage, and, as we've mentioned, appointed and could remove male chiefs. They were the first democracy in North America to empower women, not just as citizens, but as guardians of political stability. While American women wouldn't even gain the right to vote until 1920, Haudenosaunee women were already shaping nations hundreds of years earlier. In fact, early suffragists like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Matilda Joslyn Gage visited Haudenosaunee communities and were inspired by their balance of power between genders. The irony? Native women inspired the women's rights movement in a country that had largely erased them. So why don't we learn this in school? Because the myth of American exceptionalism has long depended on the idea that democracy was a purely European invention. The truth complicates that narrative. Acknowledging the Haudenosaunee influence forces us to recognize that indigenous systems were not primitive, that native societies had legal codes, diplomacy, and international relations, and that the American experiment is, in part, built on native intellectual property. But for centuries, U.S. historians downplayed or outright erased this contribution. Some textbooks briefly mention the Confederacy, others omitted entirely. It wasn't until 1988 when the U.S. Congress passed Senate Concurrent Resolution 76 that the government officially acknowledged the Haudenosaunee Confederacy's influence on the Constitution. But by then, the damage to public memory had already been done. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy still exists today. Its Grand Council continues to meet. The principles of the Great Law of Peace are still alive. And indigenous activists and scholars continue to fight for recognition, not just of their land, but of their ideas. Imagine how different the world might be if the U.S. had adopted more than just the structure of the Confederacy. If it had also embraced the role of women, consensus decision-making, a deeper respect for nature and community over capital. The Confederacy wasn't just a government, it was a vision of unity, peace, and shared power, and it's one we need more than ever. So, the next time someone tells you democracy began in Athens or Philadelphia, tell them about the Haudenosaunee, about the Tree of Peace, about the bundle of arrows that could not be broken, and about a constitution whose roots run deeper than parchment. If you learned something new today, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Help us bring these hidden truths to light. And as always, stay curious. Until next time.